Man, you cannot marry a woman without gills. You're from two different worlds. Oh, I've wasted my life.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and I've had some people in my comments, Perch, and they've been wanting to talk about continuity, specifically DC continuity, but I don't want to constrain myself just to DC. We will talk about continuity issues with DC and Marvel. Continuity seems to be no longer in vogue within the comic book industry, specifically the big two. I guess the question now, Perch, is continuity even necessary?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think a lot of people are struggling with that, including the publishers right now. And I think to the fans, the problem with continuity is it can be really great to a story and a run and everything else. It can be great. You can tap into old things. You can leverage old feuds. It can be wonderful. But if you don't do it right, if you don't do it with care, and you're rotating writers in from here and there who have different takes on that continuity, it immediately becomes a handicap to you. And I think that's where a lot of the big two find themselves today, is they've got a mess of continuity and they don't know how to fix it.
Absolutely. Another problem is you have a character like Batman. He's obviously the breadwinner at DC Comics. There's no doubt about it. He is the franchise for the entire comic industry as far as superheroes go. Do you want to constrain him just to Batman and Detective Comics?
Yeah.
Well, now you got, essentially two, maybe one more detective version, one more technology version. Maybe they can coexist and you can kind of fathom that he's doing these things at the same time. Then you throw in Justice League.
Right.
Then you got an event book. And now you all of a sudden you've got Batman inside of Gotham, which has been taken over by Bane. Then you have Batman on the other side of the galaxy with the Justice League trying to stop the new Legion of Doom. But then you also have him at Sanctuary, probably, you know what I mean? Trying to make sure that heroes deal with PTSD well.
Yeah.
And it becomes in a giant, dare I say, clusterfuck.
No, it is. And I think there's kind of two kinds of continuity. There's continuity of character, continuity where it's like, hey, Batman doesn't like this guy, or he's friends with this one detective he met, this long time ago, and they've got a history, and we want to reference that history. That's one type of continuity. And I think that's good continuity. That's just, characters being consistent. And then the other type is where you try and make it all work on some kind of linear timeline, where you try and make it all make sense in terms of time. And that's where the comic companies get themselves into trouble. And it's like Dan Didio, when he started making his giant PowerPoint of all the different years and when things are going on, there's no way to make that make any sense. You've got comics out there with Batman fighting the Nazis and Superman, Superman and Captain America punching Hitler. That doesn't make any sense in today's context. It doesn't make any sense if you want to reference Iron Man is somehow in Vietnam, but then he's not in Vietnam. He's in the Afghanistan war. So the best answer is don't bother. Honestly, don't try and make it make sense from a timeline perspective. Tell great stories, reference that history, and don't try and create a PowerPoint deck. That's a terrible idea.
Yeah, because eventually it is a house of cards. It will collapse in on itself because it just gets so confusing. You can do it probably with a character like Hawkman. He's never really going to be in more than one series of his own. Perhaps he might be an ancillary player in Justice League for a while. If there's a JSA, maybe there's an older version of that character. But you can kind of manage that. But once you start dealing with your Iron Mans, your Spider-Mans, your Batman, the characters that are just are widely used because they're so popular, it's basically unsustainable. And at this point, I would almost argue that it's not worth it because you're just going to dig yourself a bigger hole trying to keep it all sorted out rather than just acknowledging this is Batman and we can tell stories in different places and times. And perhaps even at the same time, he could, we can tell a story here and over there, and they don't have to marry together. They don't have to coalesce.
They don't, and it, like you said, it's a losing battle. It's a house of cards. The more you try and do it, the more it becomes impossible. And unless you want to start opening up doors that, frankly, if you're the big two, you don't want to open up those doors. Peter Parker is not going to age in the regular continuity. They may do, limited series, the Chip Zdarsky, comic that kind of touched on what would happen if he aged. That's great. But for the main comic line, you don't want to do that. Same thing with Batman. Same thing with all these characters. You don't want to have to deal with them becoming middle-aged and, you know, going into a retirement home or any of that. I mean, like, and you're never going to do that. If these characters are making a lot of money, you're not going to retire them. That's absurd.
Unless you're writing Kingdom Come.
Sure. And then you're writing a future old version of them. It's out of continuity, to that word again. And then you're telling your own story, and that's fine. Most people don't get obsessive with this. Granted, you go into a comic store, you'll find a handful of people who are standing around arguing some kind of minutia of what timeline happened where. But honestly, even if those people are arguing, getting really heated about it, I think they're having fun. I think the comic fans enjoy those kinds of arguments. So let them have it. Don't try and solve that at the publisher level.
Also, I think they have a tendency to overthink things. You think about Dan Didio, and like one of his big issues with legacy characters, well, it makes the original character seem old. It's like, just because you have a grown man, Dick Grayson, that's clearly in his mid-20s or may possibly even be 30 now, doesn't mean that you have to all of a sudden make Bruce Wayne 50 years old. He's his own character. He's his own hero. Yes, he is certainly tied forever to Batman. That's where he got to start. He's Robin. But it's comics, man. You don't have to overthink it. Just tell great stories.
Well, sure. It's a problem that doesn't need solving. And it's amazing to me that you have these people who on one hand recognize the fact that they've got characters who can go through dimensions and summon magic and are from other planets and shoot laser beams out of their eyes and whatever helps it happens to be. But on the other hand, they can't wrap their heads around the fact that, hey, maybe these characters aren't aging or they're not, or who cares? It doesn't matter. One of the silliest things I've seen is when Tom Brevoort was trying to explain, hey, you know, or I guess it was Jordan White, was trying to explain that the X-Men universe, it existed, you know, probably the Dark Phoenix saga was around, you know, 4 or 5 years ago or so. If you go back and read those comics, and people do, and the guys are all walking around in bell bottoms using old cordon phones and all the rest, that makes no sense. And nobody cares. Most people love that comic. They like to go back. They like to look at it. Nobody's picking up that comic going, well, I wish I could like this comic, but they're walking around in 70s clothes. And I can't relate to that because, you know, Cyclops looks about the same age there as he does here. I mean, what does that even mean? Nobody's thinking or saying any of that. So just let it go.
You know, interesting enough, you know, you can have a shared superhero universe with great continuity. Sure. Valiant. When I was reading Valiant from, what is that, like 2011 to 2018-ish, it was brilliant. But they were releasing, at max, 6 titles in a month.
Right.
So it was very small, and it was easy to contain. And when all of a sudden there was a big team-up, and you were going to have Exo Man-O-War, Ninja K, and Bloodshot all in the same event, their titles, their standalone titles, would either be tie-ins to those where they would tell kind of lead-ups to them, or they would just go like back in time and tell older stories. So even as you were reading the event in Valiant Comics, while you're reading Exo Man-O-War, it wasn't really at the same time. It was perfectly stated out that way, so it didn't cause confusion. But you can do that on a really small level.
Well, yeah, you could do it as a single title or with a couple titles in a small line, or just if that's your plan at the very beginning and you set off to do that from the start, yeah, you can build it that way. But even Valiant, if, for example, imagine if Valiant would have just taken off. 2014, those comics suddenly would have started selling like 200,000 copies a piece, and then they're like, oh, let's get some spinoffs and everything else. Valiant would have abandoned that continuity immediately because they would have had to. The sales volume and demand. So, you know, just don't worry about it. It's at this point, you as a company, you've had a bunch of freelancers. They're writing stories in all their own way. Your editorial's not even paying attention if the costumes are lining up from comic to comic. So why the hell are you worrying about how they're aging? That just makes no sense.
But interesting enough, you can kind of take that Valiant blueprint if you do want good continuity, and you can do it in like the Murphyverse, where you have Sean Gordon Murphy curating his own Batman line. It's clearly separate from the other Batman lines, and he can have a nice, tight continuity with some spin-off series, and everything can be kind of controlled. Or you could have your Deceased universe, where Tom Taylor is clearly the architect of that, and he's got a couple. I think there were 3 of them going on kind of at once, and you can kind of control that as long as it's not tied to everything else. So I think that's really where, if DC and Marvel really do want to do continuity, stay true to it, and execute it effectively, it's probably in these like side universes where they have like smaller, controlled, curated lines.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, even there, let's say the Sean Gordon Murphy, the White Knight universe, just continues to take off. They do some cartoons on it. It's even more popular. The comics are there, and Murphy at some point says, I'm just going to bow out and just be the runner, and we're going to have other people writing and drawing it because it's grown. And 20 years from now, the White Knight universe is still going. Guess what? They're not going to age the characters 20 years because we got to stick to the linear timeline of the world. That's not going to happen. This problem catches up to everyone eventually, and it's fine. It's continuity does matter. It absolutely does matter, but it matters in the sense of, hey, were these is Kraven the Hunter a villain, or is he a chummy friend of Squirrel Girl? Which is he? Don't have him be both those things in the same month. That stuff matters, certainly.
Yeah, great example. I remember I was reading Tom King's Batman. We were going down the home stretch, and there was Captain Atom, and he gets absolutely owned by Gotham Girl. She's like swinging him over her head and tosses him out on his ass.
Yep.
Makes him look like a complete fool. Then you go over to Deceased, same character, different universe. And, they try to go up against him, and he like blows up 3 cities.
Sure. Well, and I think he was in the he was part of Scott Snyder's Justice League as well when Luthor transformed. Captain is there. So, I mean, you've got these characters all used different places. Have them be consistent as you can in terms of power set, in terms of kind of what they're doing, and how it all fits together, this series and that series in the same kind of timeline, it doesn't matter. And if these characters are getting older or not, it doesn't matter. I mean, just when you think about it and you really try and stress over it, all you do is make yourselves crazy and you come off stupid. Any explanation for this just will never fly. The explanation of, hey, why did Franklin Richards basically kind of was a baby for a while and then stayed at the same age for like 20 years and then suddenly became a teenager and now he's stuck there? Like, I mean, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but don't bother trying to explain it. Just tell good stories and do what you're going to do. But don't like it. Like, the last thing we want is Dan Slott to come in and say, well, there's a reason why he aged that way is because of the tachyon beams. It's like, oh, God, what are you doing? Nobody cares. Just tell a good story.
Yeah, it's interesting, and you can really ruin a character that way. Just think about Namor.
Sure.
Who is he?
Yeah, absolutely. You can overthink this to a title's demise, and I think that's a lot of what's going on right now. I reference it again. Didio's PowerPoint chart of the generations and try and make it all. I mean, the big saving grace to 5G and all that stuff kind of going away is that they were going to try and align the timeline and make all these things chronologically make sense of like who the first superhero was and how Wonder Woman is aging at this level, not that level. Like, God, nobody wants to read that. They don't. And I'm sure somebody in the comments will want to read that. But most people, and I'll dare say it, most sane people do not want to read that shit. They just want to have a good comic.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, you think about when they did the New 52 reboot, it like Batman had only been in existence for 5 years. Like, how did he have 4 Robins?
Yeah.
It just ended up causing so many more problems than it was actually fixing. And I'm with you, man. But one of the problems though is because I think one of the reasons the publishers do like continuity is so they can sell things.
Sure.
So they go find the ultimate death of Norman Osborn. This is in continuity. It means something. But of course, we know it doesn't mean anything because in 3 years they're going to be like, man, I wish we had to kill off Norman Osborn. Sure, we got a sales bump, but we could use the villain right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, tell the story you're going to tell, but you just don't need to go to all these gymnastics to make the overarching stuff make sense from a timeline. Make these characters line up. Again, the stuff that drives me, and I know a lot of fans crazy, is when it's not continuity so much as just planning. It's like, hey, we haven't seen or heard from Ultron in like 5-10 years. Suddenly, 5 different writers all want to use him simultaneously in the books. Or it's like, hey, nobody's done anything with Daken for 3 years. I know, let's have him show up in multiple books. And he's a hero in this one and a villain in that one. And he's kind of hot for Bobby in this one. And he's romancing a girl over here. And it's like, just plan this stuff out. Don't blast your load in one month.
Absolutely. Yeah. So some planning and coordination would be paramount to all this. And that's, when you hear about Tom Brevoort, people say he's integral to the operations at Marvel because he knows the history and everything. And like, it doesn't feel like he's parsing through these things. Like, yeah, you can't do that. Yes, you can do that. That fits the character, but this here doesn't.
Yeah, I don't think he's doing any of that job. I mean, it sounds like he's just depressed out of his mind is what it sounds like. I worry about the guy. He's not paying attention.
I read that tweet.
That tweet was yikes. I mean, seriously, as a leader of the company, don't post this stuff like that. I mean, get some help. Like I'm reading that. I'm like, I hope his friends are calling him up right now. Like his family, somebody like get Twitter out of his hands. Like, but to your point, he's definitely not coordinating where the comics are going.
Yes, it's I can understand people's frustrations if Marvel and DC want to have a shared connective continuity, within their universe. They need to work harder on it. But I think they would probably be best served to basically abandon it. Go like what Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips do with Criminal. Yes, it is a multi-generational story. It's crime noir. But they just bounce around and tell the story that they want to tell. Maybe this time Teague Lawless is 30. This time he's 50. This time he's 15. And they just tell that they don't worry about, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I hope people who've bothered to listen this far in a video understand. I mean, I love it. If you could pull it off, do it. Absolutely. But don't do it half-assed. If you're going to do it half-assed, just don't bother. That's the problem. If you're going to commit to the bit, like Kirkman did for Invincible, or like Valiant has, and there's many examples, then you gotta pay attention. You have to have that editing. You have to worry about it. If you are going to kind of one day worry about this thing, but the next day we've got 4 different Avengers events going on simultaneously at the same time, and then just stop. Just focus. Then your strength is going to be try and tell the best stories you can, and shut up about the rest.
So this will be my final anecdote or example. We've had House of X Powers of 10, head of X, Jonathan Hickman. He's been in charge of X-Men since the very first issue of that. He's essentially the curator of Dawn of X, correct?
Yep, that's it.
Head of X. We're reading, I believe it was Powers of 10. I think it was issue 5, but it might have been issue 4. And we learned that Moira has lived to be like 900 years old because she's been getting blood transfusions from Logan the entire time. Thankfully, they have the same blood type, and he's able to keep healing her up, and she's alive with him essentially in the human zoo in the future.
Yep. Very
important to the continuity and the storytelling of House of X Powers of 10. What did we just learn a month ago within Wolverine?
Yeah, that he has the unique blood type that matches nobody.
The only person in the world with a type E blood type.
Yeah.
We're talking like that's pretty, that's pretty narrow field of view as far as what Jonathan Hickman and the House of X, Powers of X, Dawn of X team are doing there. Boom. Just missed a key component.
Yeah, and it's one of those cases where I think most fans would go, well, that's kind of a no prize material, or just a wacky slip, or maybe let's think of so maybe in the future things change. I don't know. Most fans would do that. But when then Marvel comes out and talks endlessly, I mean, there's another interview up today with Teenie Howard talking about, hey, we're on the phone together as a team every day. Every day. Yeah, we're talking and we're planning, and we are more coordinated than ever before. And we are so in sync. This is a perfect. If you're going to boast that stuff, then you're going to look like an asshole when you don't do it. So it's like, again, one or the other. Most fans would not care about the blood type, or rather, they would chalk it up. They would be the Stan Lee no prize. That's what would happen. But when you boast that, we're caring about this, that's because it goes back to it. Don't pretend to care about it and then fuck it up. One or the other.
It is annoying as shit. That's the point. So I don't think that they can manage it. Their shared universes are too big. Obviously, it feels like DC is paring down their universe and they're creating little pocket universes. You got Injustice, Deceased, we got White Knight. I'm sure we'll get a couple others in there. Hopefully, as a Superman-centric one here in the future. Maybe as they pare it down, it'll be easier to manage. I don't know how Marvel will ever be able to manage it because they always have these concurrent. What's up?
Yeah. No, I mean, well, Superman just needs a competent writer, and then maybe that could happen. But yeah, I mean that I don't see how Marvel. I mean, I take it back. They can do it. They did the Ultimate Universe in the past. It's possible for them to do this stuff.
That's cool. Yeah,
they can do it. They just have to commit and, maybe stop talking about how coordinated you are and actually, coordinate. I'm just saying that would be a crazy idea, but maybe, on your $32,000 a year salary, that might be something you want to try.
Yeah, it would be a nice change of pace, but I think that's kind of all I had to say. I feel the frustration of the viewers. Like, what is up with DC continuity? It's fucked up.
Yeah.
And so is Marvel continuity. It's almost unmanageable at this point because it's gotten so big. You would have to have like somebody that was literally dedicated to keeping the continuity straight. And I don't think that they're willing to put that kind of resource out there.
Yeah, you need to have like a VP of editorial who's a trivia expert and knows all about Marvel to actually do that job.
Yeah.
If only they had such a person.
Yeah, Robert Willing is probably willing to do that job.
Yeah.
He might even do it for $45,000. Who knows?
You never know. Hope springs eternal.
So I don't know. Those are just kind of my thoughts, Perch. Thank you so much for joining me today. I think this is a fun conversation. It's been a slow news week, so it's fun to talk about these kind of topics. Hopefully, we have another one. We're thinking about talking about here in the next day or two. So hopefully, we'll get to that one as well, and people will get to watch that on Friday. But if you enjoy Perch, the stylings of the Perch, the Poobah Comics himself, there's a link to his YouTube channel in the video description. There's also an icon on the channel that says Comics by Perch. You can select it, go to his channel, and subscribe that way. I highly recommend it. Great dude, good friend of mine, and the dude lives and breathes comics, people. That's all he does.
Too much. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's always fun talking to you.